that I am Jennifer Zwilling. My pronouns are she, her. I am the curator and director of artistic programs here at the Clay Studio. And it is absolutely one of my favorite parts of my job, that I get to talk to artists and bring our community together, usually every other week, to do these programs. We recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role of all of us to join in the tradition and respect and caring for the land and each other. I'm going to introduce Celia and Justin, and then we will begin our conversation. Celia Feldberg is a potter and a lifelong lover of drawing. She earned her BFA from Massachusetts College of Art and Design in 2019. She spent time at Penland School of Craft, where she studied letterpress printmaking and working as a studio assistant for Ben Carter and Janet Link. Most recently, she is making red clay pottery with sgraffito drawings to tell stories that she finds funny or charming. We'll see some of those in a moment. She sells her work through her own online store, the Clay Studio, and other galleries, and lives in Philadelphia with her metalsmith partner and a lot of houseplants. Metalsmith partner, that sounds like that your partner is your metalsmith's partner, but that's not quite exactly what it means. Yeah. I think it's probably because I edited it to be in the third person. Anyway, Justin Rothshank has been working as a studio ceramic artist in Goshen, Indiana since 2009. In 2001, he co-founded the Union Project, a nonprofit organization located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Justin's ceramic work has been exhibited and published nationally and internationally, including articles in Ceramics Monthly, American Craft, Studio Potter, The Logbook, and Noya Ceramic. He has been a presenter, panelist, visiting artist, and artist in residence at numerous universities, schools, conferences, and art centers throughout the United States and abroad. His functional and decorative ceramic ware is available for purchase in more than 24 galleries and gift shops around the country. Justin was presented with a 2017 Individual Advancement Grant from the Indiana State Arts Council. Congratulations. An Award of Excellence by the American Craft Council in February 2009. 2007, he was recognized by Ceramics Monthly as an emerging artist, and has also been awarded an Alcoa Foundation Leadership Grant for Arts Management. Oh, Alcoa in Pittsburgh, very important. Aluminum, the future, the metal of the future. Sorry, tangential. The 2005 Decade of Servant Leadership Award from Goshen College, and was named the Pittsburgh Magazine's 40 Under 40 in 2005. Very exciting. All right, we're going to start with Celia and then go back to Justin to ask the question I always ask, which is, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
So I feel like I just always really loved to make things, and growing up I always wanted to be drawing or doing some kind of craft or cooking something, and my parents were always really encouraging of that and really supportive. And it kind of felt like going through school and everything, there wasn't anything besides art that really had my heart and interest. So I kind of knew that I wanted to go to art school, and I took a wheel throwing class my first year, and I loved clay. So I started doing illustration and ceramics as a dual major, and it was just really great to find something that I was so passionate about, I think, at such an early age, and just kind of continue following that, and to have really great teachers and friends, and just a lot of support and encouragement to be doing what I was passionate about. And then I graduated right before the pandemic, and I was working as a production potter for this guy who wanted to start a dinnerware company, and doing some teaching. And then within that year, everything shut down for the pandemic, and I just started making pottery out of a home studio. And I feel like the production pottery job kind of tuned me into looking at a lot of different potters' work. And at first, like putting those pieces out into the world, like they were kind of received by the people who knew me, and they were really supportive. And I was able to just spend this time at home during the pandemic, really focusing on building my business, making ceramics, and sharing it on Instagram, and was able to kind of gather enough like encouragement to keep doing that, and to make me feel like I could support myself and that it will keep growing from here. So I think the how and why is really related to just having a really good support system, and that creating like believing in myself and thinking that I can do this. And since I really love to do this, it seems hard to give that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a gift, that feeling that you believe in yourself. That's lovely. When you went into your home studio during the pandemic, was that the first time that you made pottery with your own drawings on it, or had you been already experimenting with that?
It was sort of the first time. It kind of, I was drawing on like more sculptural forms when I was in school. And I think drawing on clay in general has always been something that I've been excited about. But yeah, those were like the first pots that I started drawing on.
That's great. And that was really informed by this almost apprenticeship that you had, basically like just throwing pots over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Want to talk about that a little bit, what that gave you?
Yeah, doing the production pottery for the dinnerware really just allowed me to get a lot of practice in like making pots and going through all of the motions, and also just had me start to look at a lot of different potters and be like reading Ceramics Monthly and Pottery Making Illustrated, and just like feeling like I was kind of like, oh, like there's all these potters out there and they're so cool, and how do I like do that also?
But that also showed you that people were doing it.
Yes.
It was a viable way to make, not an easy way perhaps, but a way that people were doing.
Yeah.
It's really important. So I think we talked yesterday too about your techniques, but maybe we'll save that for when we're looking at your
Sure.
Thank you. That's good. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Well, that feels like a long time ago.
Well, you're still doing it. So it's now.
What's that?
You're still doing it, so it's still now.
Yeah. Well, I really got into clay as a high school student, and decided to pursue that as my major in college. So I would echo a little bit of what Celia said. I had lots of good encouragement and family support systems in place. And yeah, so post college, I was really compelled to find a way to make a living as an artist. I wasn't actually sure what kind of art I would do. I was interested in clay, but I pursued a year-long apprenticeship with a cabinet maker also. So I was really interested in woodworking. And I started dating my now wife, as a college senior, and she's a painter, but also really interested in glass blowing. So there were these 4 different media that we were interested in and sort of pursued together. And right out of college, I moved to Pittsburgh, and got involved with a group of similar folks similar to my age, who were interested in finding careers in the arts. And I guess my entrepreneurial spirit came through, and I became involved in founding the Union Project. So I got sidetracked from really pursuing a career as a maker, and pursued a career as an arts administrator, and did clay on the side for 9 years. But that was always sort of the path for me to finding a way to employment as an artist. I needed a place to make art, and there wasn't one readily available in Pittsburgh. So starting the Union Project got me over that hurdle and got me involved in learning how to write grants and learning how to manage people and learning a lot about building a studio and networking with other artists, so that when I moved away from Pittsburgh, I feel like I had the necessary life skills to actually set up my own studio.
That is really great to hear from the standpoint of an arts administration. You know, that here at the Clay Studio, that's what we are doing all the time, you know, grant writing and managing people and organizing spaces. And it is quite an important skill set. And I love that you were able to then, you know, go back to making and apply all that that knowledge, because I think that it's you know, we try to offer, for instance, to the resident artists, like mentorship, and there are programs around the city that are doing like professional practices, but nothing is the same as just doing it.
Yeah, it's you know, finding a way to earn a living. It's a real challenge to know that you either have to make pots or get a grant or some other real achievement to actually pay the mortgage and buy groceries next month. So the motivation was always pretty strong for me coming out of college to find ways to earn a living working with the things that I had in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, the Union Project is pretty amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about what inspired you to start it? And
yeah, so Union Project is a nonprofit organization in Pittsburgh. It's housed in an old church building, right at the literal intersection between East Liberty and Highland Park, which are two pretty diverse neighborhoods in the East End of Pittsburgh. And really what inspired me to get involved was, like I said, I was fresh out of college. I was 22 years old. I had no money and no studio, and there were no places in Pittsburgh I could go to that existed like the Clay Studio exists in Philadelphia. There wasn't a place where someone who had achieved a certain level of ability in clay could go and just make work. And so my interest in the Union Project was, well, here's a big vacant building that's pretty cheap that we could set up a clay studio in. I didn't quite realize at the time how much was going to be involved in actually renovating and starting the organization. It took us about 5 years to raise the money and build the infrastructure from an organizational standpoint to actually launch programs and launch a clay studio. But in that intervening time, I got sidetracked and got interested in things like stained glass restoration and historic preservation, and built my own, actually renovated and rebuilt my own house in Pittsburgh. And so I ended up having a studio. By the time we actually launched the studio at Union Project, I had sort of achieved what I set out for myself, but then was able to build that organization for other people. So it's still going on. It's I guess 21 years old now. Still has a clay studio, still has a lot of other arts related organizational things going on in the building. I'm no longer affiliated with it professionally, although I'm a big giant supporter of the Union Project. I moved away from Pittsburgh in 2009 to set up my own studio back in my hometown.
yeah. And I'm sorry, I can't help chuckle at, like, you didn't realize how hard it was going to be, and probably if you had realized it, you wouldn't have started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, that's the story of the Clay Studio as well. And you know, we were just talking about Ken Vavrick, whose art is on the wall, and the 5 people who founded the Clay Studio in 1974. Just they found an old building and they just wanted shared studio space. And yeah, 48, how many years? 48 years later, it's supporting other people. And the moral of the story is it's really hard work, but it can be done if you have the will to do it. And that's great. And that's the echo of the clay community working together and being willing to work hard.
Yeah.
Which is also echoed in our new building, which you're going to come visit soon.
That's right.
Okay, so now I'm gonna open the PowerPoint and we will look at Celia's work and then we will look at Justin's work. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Very, so Jennifer asked if we could make slideshows that show the evolution of our work. And it was really cool to make it because I did not realize how much my work has evolved over the last few years. But I wanted to start out with showing some drawings because that's always kind of been my favorite thing to make. And I had a really rigorous sketchbook practice for a number of years, mostly when I was in school, and I loved drawing people when they weren't looking, or things around me, and trying to draw the whole scene where you start somewhere and then you just keep going right up until drawing your own hand drawing in your own book. And it was really great to have a really dedicated practice in my sketchbook, and then to turn some of those other drawings into more finalized things.
And did you ever get in trouble for drawing all the time in school?
Yes, definitely. And then, so in ceramics, I was also trying to explore a lot of different ways of putting drawing on clay. So I was doing monoprints and painting with cobalt and sgraffito and mishima, and just really trying it all. I wanted to find something that just felt really comfortable and easy for me. So this one on the left is a monoprint that I soda fired to give it that kind of dreamy look. And the one on the right is painting with cobalt, which is kind of like painting with watercolor, except for you can't see anything that you're doing because it's really light pink when you paint it on. And then this was one of the first sgraffito pieces I did. So it's a bear and a boy sleeping in the forest. And that felt pretty comfortable to me. I feel like sgraffito feels the most like drawing with a pen on paper. And that's what I've been mostly doing now. And I wanted some of these drawings to start kind of playing more with the clay. So I was making sculptural forms and then drawing on them in a way where the arm could come off and the form could kind of follow that. And I liked the idea of having these forms with multiple sides because I could put a character on one side and a character on another side, and they kind of related to each other, but then they couldn't see each other. So maybe one was hiding. So this is one piece, but two different angles.
Kevin Snipes has talked about that in his work.
Yeah. I'm a really big fan of his work. This is after school, starting to make my own pots, when we had talked about the first illustrated pots that I was making at home. And I was just sort of playing around with the things that I like to draw, which are people and animals. These were the first raccoons that I was doing. So my character that I draw a lot now is a raccoon, and they did start out being realistic, but they've just really evolved over time to be very stylized. This is sort of the beginning of what I consider to be the work that I'm making now. And I think I was really excited that when you draw a character and put it in a situation that you can just have a narrative. So they're biking to get pies. And this is what it looks like now. So I've just kind of been doing these animal characters in everyday human situations And a lot of them are inspired by things that I'm doing that are like making me laugh or bringing me some joy or comfort. And I've been developing like all these like little characters to exist in these situations. And similar to having that like multi-sided form, I love the way that when you have a mug or like anything except for really a plate, I guess, you're turning it in your hand and it kind of tells the story because you can't see everything all at once. This one is a raccoon like struggling to carry all of the groceries in one trip.
And everything.
And a cake plate that I recently made that has foxes in a treehouse, and there's all these like little animals. And I think I also really like to hide a lot of little things in the drawings that you can discover if you take the time to really look at them.
This one looks like it could be the hidden pictures and highlights magazine.
I love that.
Maybe next.
Yeah, and this is my last image, I think, but I thought this would be good for all the ceramics people. So he's saying like, hey, what mug do you want? And then the other one's like, surprise me. And then their mug wall is on the other side.
Yeah, that's great. Lovely. So I love seeing the earlier work, and I wonder, now that you're establishing this work as your brand, kind of, for lack of a better word, do you have any interest or plan to like go back to a more like one of your earlier styles, or like just a different style to maybe make a second line? Because I would think you could keep doing this, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think I definitely do have that interest, and there's like certain things that this work like doesn't satisfy, but I think it's really hard for me to do like more than one thing at once. So I think it would be more likely that this work just continues to evolve in order to like meet what I want it to, instead of me being able to like continue making this, but also doing something like completely different.
Got it. What are those things that you don't feel like are being met with this work that you would evolve into?
I think like maybe something like more, I don't necessarily want to say like more serious, but maybe like more just like observational drawing, because that's something I've always really loved doing. And yeah, maybe just something a little less cutesy and fun and something more like observational. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, the word atmospheric comes to mind when I was looking at your other work. But I would hate to lose the raccoons.
Yeah, we love the raccoons.
Lovely. Okay, so that answers what's next a little bit. And I didn't, I know it's hard for, I think people online, it's easier if I move the microphone. I didn't really mention the fact that I paired you and Justin together because of the fact that you both are using pictorial images or illustrative images on your work, which I probably should say, otherwise it's like, why are these two people both here at the same time? So we'll turn to Justin's work in a moment. The other thing that this reminds me from when we were talking yesterday is that I was surprised when you reminded me you've only been here for like 4 months.
Yeah.
Because you're working in the studio almost every time I walk by, and the work has become like a friend because I'm used to seeing it. So it's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna turn to Justin and talk a little bit about your process and your inspiration, and the you do have kind of like two or maybe even 3 different bodies of work going in a way, although they're very related.
Yeah. Well, this piece is an earthenware piece, and a lot of the work that I make from a production standpoint is made of a red earthenware with a white, glossy white glaze. And I do that from a practical standpoint because the glossy white really allows images to pop. I do a lot of portrait work, which you'll show images of later, with political figures, and so those, I sort of think about like this jar that you see here, and then the political figures is in some ways the same body of work. It's made the same way from a technical standpoint, all fired in electric kilns, all fired with multiple layers of decals, floral imagery, iron toner decals. And so from a practical standpoint, I can fire it relatively quickly through my electric kilns. I can decorate it and refire it multiple times. And that process tends to be fairly simple from a technical standpoint. The imagery I choose has a lot to do with my interest in the natural landscape that I live in. I live about 5 miles outside of the city of Goshen, which is about a 40,000 population. But I live in a rural area on 20 acres of wooded land, and I'm surrounded by farmers and Amish farmers and other sort of rural landscape type of environment. I also was raised Mennonite, and I use the poppy image as sort of a symbol, my own personal chosen symbol of opposition to war, which is how I was raised and how I continue to think about war and violence and those sorts of things. So the poppy has sort of stemmed from that, but also relates really well to the natural landscape.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you discovered the use of decals? And I mean, you do it in this very unique way that you're layering different, styles of drawing within the decals. And I love that, you're using the decals in different ways, because it's like the shadow of the image sometimes, and then the positive of it.
Yeah. So my interest in decals came about because I don't have nearly the drawing talent that Celia does or anyone else. I've never been someone that draws. I've always been more interested in 3D stuff, and so I had this interest in finding ways to put imagery on clay, but so back in 2005, I took a workshop at Anderson Ranch that talked about printing on clay. And if you think back to 2005, that was a lot before things like Facebook and Instagram existed. It was before things like Enduring Images, decal printers existed. And it was back when people making things with earthenware clay was not nearly as prominent as it is now. So this workshop dealt a lot with screen printing on clay, how to make your own China paint decals, how to work with China paint. But also at the very end of the workshop, we learned about this new idea, which was the iron toner transfer. And all of it stuck with me, but what really stuck was the iron toner stuff, because it was so versatile. I was at the time, and still am, very interested in atmospheric firing, and iron toner decals could work on earthenware clay, but they could work on stoneware and porcelain, and could be treated the same way you would treat an iron wash. And so I began experimenting with decals in all kinds of firing atmospheres: wood kilns, soda kilns, electric kilns, both before and after glaze was put on. And so I really just started relying on imagery in that way, and building up surface using decals.
Can you define iron transfer decal?
Well, it's printed with an off-the-shelf printer, and the pigment that's in the off-the-shelf toner that HP makes there's iron in that, and so when you fire the decal, the iron toner remains, and the iron color is the color of the decal.
Right, so it's not where you're not getting the colored decals from there. That's like
That's right.
That's
And so I use
cool.
a wide variety of decals. Like on this piece, I designed the gold imagery on the left and had that printed by a decal printer that works with gold. I sourced the red poppy from a catalog of stock imagery. And in the previous slide, I used that same red poppy, but the red decal I had custom printed, and then the bird imagery is sourced from a decal catalog as well.
It's great. There's so much information and data in there and in here as well with the other kind of firing techniques. Thank you for explaining that.
Mhm.
You want to talk a little bit about the next couple?
Yeah, so this is great. These are brand new pieces that just came out of my wood kiln. I got interested, like I mentioned earlier, in clay as a high school student, and my first real experience with firing was firing a wood kiln with a couple local potters back when I was in high school. So I've always been compelled by atmospheric firing, and that's been consistent for the last 25 years that I've worked in clay. So this piece is a porcelain piece. It's got lots of sand and grog thrown in, and then it's fired in my wood kiln. I fire for 95 hours with 6 cords of wood. So ash buildup is important to me. But the kiln is a relatively large kiln, so there's a lot of different environments just within the one kiln that I feel like I can take advantage of. The pot that you showed previously was fired in that same kiln, but in a different location. So it's got a much different effect going on. And I love the variety of surface that comes out. And I often then respond once pieces are out with adding decals or not adding decals, depending on how I want to approach the piece. This is another piece from that same firing.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. And that sort of the memory of the fire is really evocative. And that there are often sort of non-clay people watching or might watch the recording. Do you want to talk a little bit about the seashell forms that we can see?
Yeah, this piece was fired on its side to help create that sort of green drip right in the middle. And the seashells were put there as a refractory, so the ash glaze wouldn't stick to the kiln shelf. The seashells then are burned up in the firing, and just their imprint remains. And that allows for more texture variation and design on the surface.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about your the political work that you do.
Yeah, I make this line of functional tableware that features mostly American political figures, although occasionally there are folks outside of that I've made work with. I've always been interested in US history and finding ways to address social justice through tableware. So I've been making these political pieces since 2007. I've gone through 3 presidential elections and all of the rise and fall of different politicians over that time frame. My personal choice is to use only a head and shoulders shot. Usually it's the shot that the politician has chosen for their photo that's in the Library of Congress. And it's just been really fascinating for me to hear responses to what someone's portrait evokes. Certain people feel strongly one way or the other about certain portraits, for sure.
Yeah, Do you remember who the first one you made was?
Yeah, Lyndon Johnson.
I was not expecting that.
I I've been really interested in presidential history, and Lyndon Johnson is a compelling figure in U.S. presidential history, and has a compelling face. I'm not sure I'd call it pretty, but compelling. And that
Good word.
there's a extensive biography about Lyndon Johnson written by Robert Caro. It's 6 volumes.
Oh my
It's
God.
a fabulous tracing of Johnson's life from his birth to eventually to his death. The history is not fully written yet. So I was reading that back in 2007 when I started this work.
Mm. Yeah, and then political events started just after that. You just started doing more. Did you know right away that you were going to make it into this long series, or did you think, oh, I'm just going to do this once?
Well, as things go, initially you don't just crank out all 46 US presidents. That takes some time. So yeah, initially it was just, a president here or there as someone requested, until I realized the social statements that I could make, and how I wanted to formulate the body of work. So I think I grew into it in some ways, but also there's a need to make a living. So finding ways to fit this into general production has been essential to my success as a studio artist. Certainly there are figures that I could choose, past or present, who may be financially lucrative but don't necessarily fit into my own moral choices. There's also, I would say 7 or 8 years ago, a recognition of what is actually legal from an image usage standpoint.
Yeah.
So I've focused on politicians, because as US citizens, we own the photographs of our elected leaders, because they're photographed for the Library of Congress. So they're fair use for us to interpret, which isn't the case for people like Beyonce or other entertainers. So focusing on political figures has been where I've ended up.
So it started out with presidents, and then it went out from there.
Yeah, then it sort of spiraled out of control, and then it reined back in, and now it's pretty much to elected folks.
I often wondered, like, if I was getting the last Star Wars mug that was allowed to exist.
As my work made it further into the world, my awareness of what was allowed also grew.
Right. Yeah. And so I won't break my Buffy the Vampire Slayer mug either. It's my favorite. Great. So when we're going to talk a little bit about your collaborations, and then we can take questions.
Yeah, collaborations for me have been a fun way to stay connected to the larger clay world, but also a way to push my own technical or lack of technical knowledge. It's been, my interest in decals has often been used as a way to respond to the surface that's in front of me. So I can put a decal on just about anything, but I like to respond to work that's in front of me, and also work with other artists to develop ideas that maybe exceed my own technical ability. And so collaboration is a way to do both of those things.
Yeah. Can
This
you
is
yeah, I didn't write the other artist name. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. This is Horacio Casillas Jr. He is he went to grad school in Texas, and he's living in Tennessee now. So he made the plate, he carved the pattern, he did all the glazing, and then I added the decal work in the middle.
Cool. It's beautiful.
This is a piece. that I made the vessel and did the glazing work. The imagery comes from Isaac Scott, who you probably know, there in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
He was doing photography work during the pandemic when he couldn't do clay work because the studio was closed, and took these compelling images of protests in the streets of Philadelphia, and we worked together to choose the images, and then I put them onto the glazed surface. This is an example of an iron toner decal.
So that's just something you could print that in your house on your
Correct.
inkjet printer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked, Isaac sent me the original photos, and then I turned them into decals and fired the decals on.
Great. Oh, that's blurry. Sorry about that.
That's okay. This is a blown glass piece. I want back in 2000, I don't know, 15 or 16. I taught the fall concentration at Penland School, and was able to work with folks in the glass studio to figure out ways to do decal transfer work onto hot glass. And then I went back the next year to teach again in a summer class, and spent some time working with John Getzy in his glass studio up the road in Bakersville to create this body of work. So these are John Getzy's forms. He blew out the glass. I applied decals to these large glass, almost paperweight sized pieces, which he then heated up, gathered glass over that, blew out the form, finished the form, and then gave it back to me, and I applied a second layer of decals. So it's hard to see in the photo, but there's decals encased within the glass and then also on the surface of the glass. But it was a way for me. I'm not obviously a glass blower, but my wife was, and so I know the concepts, but wanted to push the boundaries of temperature and think about how decals work in a transparent environment as opposed to a opaque glazed surface. And so these pieces, you can see the light going all the way through, which is really cool.
That's great. Well, thank you. I think I'll just say that one other thing that to me connects your work and Celia's work is that they are joyful. Your work that's political. I mean, when I've looked at the choices that you make, you are picking people who you believe are doing good, I think. And it transfers to the user or the viewer that like it's a way of appreciating, which is gratitude, and that kind of just fills me with joy. And when there were more TV characters and things, it was always somebody who made me smile, like Wonder Woman or Buffy, all those. And then it's the same thing with Celia's, you look at them and you just can't help but smile. So I want to open it up for questions, but just thank you both for making joyful artwork. Yeah. Okay, so if people in the room have questions, I'll just have to repeat them so that Justin can hear. Anybody have a question? Or online? Raymond, yeah.
So I'm curious about Justin's use of the iron from his printer. Has he ever used iron from the toner of the copier? I remember years ago, I used to make a photocopies before we went on the shut the copier off and take the paper before the iron and heat it on the set.
Oh.
And then I would transfer that to like cloth.
Oh, did you have you ever used the iron from a copier instead of a printer? And Raymond has a way that he would hack the copier and like open it mid copy and then use the unheated toner to make a transfer.
I've never done that, but I know it's possible, and I know the process. I don't have a copier, so it's not particularly efficient for me, but I do know that it's possible. And I know there That's actually how it was discovered that these toner decals worked, was through that knowledge.
Yeah. And I mean, the original way that people were doing this was with newspaper, right?
Yeah, I think that's the case, and also, I mean, with those printer or copier transfers, they were using the toner in that print as a way to resist, so that they could do like slip transfers.
Oh,
So there's a couple different ways that's possible.
Hmm.
I found in my work with the decal process that from a technical standpoint, it just seemed way easier to me. There was just way fewer steps. Maybe that's just how my brain works, and other people think it's more complicated, but that's why I moved into this process.
Meaning decal instead of transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is there other, I mean, then you can use iron in other ways. I mean, obviously there's iron in glaze and stuff, but you could paint it, maybe? I don't know. And it would just be in glaze. I don't know. I'm not a maker. Who else has a question? Anyone online? Before I say something else to show my ignorance.
I actually do have a question.
Vicky, yeah.
So with the iron transfer, it seemed that sometimes there was also color added in. So after you would put the decal on, then you would add color into it. Like I'm thinking about some of the flowers or the birds.
Oh, you're asking about she's asking about the colored decals. Those are a different kind of decal.
Right, but I thought that there was a combination maybe of the two, but that doesn't happen.
Oh, do you ever add color later?
Into the iron transfer.
Can you paint into the iron transfer, like add color to that transfer type?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. The iron toner transfer is only ever iron in color, but I fire those pieces multiple times. And I do that because the iron fires at a different temperature than the color. Often the vibrant colors need to be fired at a lower temperature. They're all fired after the glaze firing, so they're fired in decreasing temperature style. So I do add color in after the iron has been applied, but I do that through a different kind of decal, and then I refire it. So it's in some ways almost like a printmaking process, where you think about the layers and what's going to be in the background goes down first, and then the foreground and so on comes after that. So I figured out ways in which I can add decals at varying stages of the making process to add color or add detail the way I want it to be.
Jennifer Martin asked in the chat if the gold decal is a special order.
Again, sort of yes and no. I mean, I special order my own designs printed in gold or whatever color I want. But you can also purchase varying designs, pre-existing designs that are made of gold or other colors also. And that's perhaps the most confusing part of my process, is that there are lots of different kinds of underglaze or glaze or clay. There's also lots of different kinds of decals, and I use them all. And I also use 6 different clay bodies and 10 different glazes. And so it's like a decal is not always just a decal. They can be fired in different ways at different temperatures, made of different colors, and used and sourced from different places, just the way any other ceramic material can be acquired. And so I use them all in different ways to achieve that end result.
Thank you. What company is best? Sounds like Jennifer wants to make some gold decals.
I mean, there's lots of companies out there, but if you're looking for custom, I would recommend Milestone Decal.
Okay, good to know. We don't have a lot of questions for Celia because people get to talk to her all the time, but I'm interested in, sgraffito is such a historic technique. Is it something that you've been inspired by historic work to do, or do you, when you go to the museum, are you kind of focusing on that stuff?
I don't know. I think like most of my sgraffito inspiration is like contemporary people. Like I feel like I was told like Kathy King was like the queen of sgraffito. And I think the way that I'm doing it is like not really the way that you maybe think of more when you're carving away just as much as you're leaving.
Mm.
But I'm more using it just to like get the line and then adding color.
Mhm.
But no, I don't know a lot of historical sgraffito. I think it's more current people.
Okay. Well, if you want, I can help you.
I would
out.
love that.
Great. Any other questions? No. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us in between your soccer matches.
My
Go
pleasure.
USA.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, it was so great to get to talk to you in person, and we'll all rush downstairs and look at your work in person in the shop when this is over. So, all right. Thanks, Celia. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.